I'm Elaine Jagelski. If you don't like where your feeling state is at and you want to feel better, then know that better is always relative to where you are in the moment. And so if you don't like, again, how you're feeling, and you want to move into that more aligned space, because when you are feeling good, then typically that's one of the indications that you are aligned with your higher self or your higher mind, and you're moving into the space of infinite possibilities. So if you're at the sort of what we would call the bottom of the emotional scale, so frequency wise, each of the emotions has a certain frequency. And at the foundation of it would be things like hopelessness, powerlessness, despair. And if you're in those states, then to feel better could mean actually moving into emotions like jealousy. Now, I know some of this is going to sound a little bit contrary because it's like, well, jealousy isn't better. That's not good. But on a frequency basis, and in order to create movement, it is better. The key is you don't want to get stuck. Like it's just you don't want to get stuck in necessarily some of the lower frequency types of emotions. And so if you're feeling that powerlessness, and then you move into a space of where you're thinking, well, how come they get to be so happy and I'm sitting over here miserable? Take that as encouragement. It still doesn't feel great, but take that as encouragement that you're actually moving up the scale. So if you can try to remember that when it's happening. And then to move into things like revenge. Again, this doesn't mean you act on that emotion, but to feel it where it's like, well, I'll show them. Great. You've moved up a number of sort of frequency points from that despair, from that powerlessness. And so see that as progress. Once again, very important not to get stuck in the emotion and start coming up with vengeful plans and those kinds of things. Moving into anger, again, you're moving up the scale. There's a few emotions in between some of these. We're just sort of hopping along. And so if you've been feeling disempowered and then you get angry at some point, once again, that's a great indication that there's movement. Things are happening. You just don't want to get stuck in the anger and start cycling in there. And often what people will do is because, well, anger's bad, you shouldn't be angry. And so they'll dip back down into the depression, into the powerlessness, and then eventually they make their way back up to anger, and then they come back down. So if you can see it as steps, it's like, okay, I don't want to stay here, but there's movement happening. I will take that as encouragement. And then you can start moving into, you might start feeling things like discouragement or doubt or disappointment. Again, those are better. That's the next best feeling thought. And so that's great if you start moving into that territory, if you've been, once again, in that disempowered state, and then maybe through jealousy or revenge or hatred and then anger and so on. So when you start moving into that zone, as far as even overwhelmment, frustration, you're heading places, right? Now we're getting close to the tippy point into things that start feeling better. And so if you might go then from pessimism into boredom. And then boredom can shift into contentment and feeling hopeful, and then potentially optimism, and so on, eventually until you're in that sense of passion and love and empowerment. And so feeling better, as was mentioned at the beginning, is always relative to where have you started. So anywhere in what sort of has been mentioned, go for the next best feeling thought to do your best to move into that space of alignment with your higher self and your higher mind. So try not to judge what you're feeling. Don't get stuck there. Just keep going for the next best feeling. See it as movement, even though it doesn't necessarily, all of those sort of lower frequency emotions don't feel that great. But know that you're making progress if you keep hopping up the ladder or up the scale.